Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
We're going to talk about what's going on right now, and that happens to be there's a conference in Jackson Hole. They're probably having a lot of fun. They probably have fun and games out there. I don't think they're skiing because it's a little warm for skiing, but they're skirting around. They're going to solve the problems of the world. I think they do it every year, and the Fed gets to set it up. They're sort of like the host for this conference to talk about the special events of the world, and there sure is a lot. They've been going on, and Trump, is very much involved, and he's been talking to the Russians, and he's going to talk to Zelensky tomorrow. So it looks like they're serious about trying to stop this war. But it'd been much easier, Chris, I think, if they just would have started it. This whole idea, what's the role of NATO now? Should they be involved to help sort things out? Well, NATO was more than one half of the problem. NATO, along with the United States and the former president, they initiated all this with a coup and throwing out an elected government, and yet today it's still, the propaganda is that Russia started it, and Russia invaded on a certain date, and that was the beginning, of the war. Well, it's a little more complex than that, but it's likely coming to an end, because they're really scurrying around now. Where are the borders going to be? It's criminal. Well, the whole war is criminal, but it's like, how many more square feet can we get? And they never say, how many more men, women, and children will die in the process. But they will fight for a couple square feet because they think maybe it will become semi-permanent, which is, just pie in the sky. Once again, it's empires, military-industrial complex, and many other things involved in these no-win wars. And I know a lot of us have been hopeful, but not overly optimistic, that the promises and the interests of our new president had is that they were going to stop these wars. And it hasn't happened the way he had led us to believe. Chris.
Right, Dr. Paul. And on one positive note, we'll give him some credit. President Trump speaking with Putin and having these meetings is a good thing in and of itself. Biden wouldn't talk to Putin. We remember that. But we can't forget that Donald Trump campaigned to get this done on day one, and that's what everybody wanted. It's now day 211. And, this is now, he keeps calling it Biden's war, but after 211 days, and you still have not gotten America out of this by just walking out of it, it becomes your war too, President Trump. So it's no more money, no more weapons. And you can't say NATO, 70% of what they spend comes from our tax money. It's, Ukraine, he also says Zelensky could stop this at any moment. Zelensky is the proxy. It's a very shameful thing that happened, that they're the proxy of a war between America and Russia. And they took the brunt of it so that there's no direct conflict with nuclear powers. It is President Trump that could put this, right as we speak, he could put an end to it. So this has now gone 211 days into his administration. It should have never started, as Dr. Paul mentioned, but it doesn't have to continue past this day. And President Trump is continuing it. So hopefully now, like we said, the positive is that they're talking. Now get it done and get us out of this losing war.
One thing going on with this conference and this discussion that's going on, because a lot of people believe the war will end one way or the other. And I think that people understand that it's not going to be a firm thing, But most of the time they settle them, and then it's so artificial. And this is the reason that, Zelensky, he's lining up. I think it's so criminal what we have allowed Zelensky to do to us and to our government, and in some ways really embarrass our government, because all he has to do is come up with his hat. And even when he was insulting the president, he still he still has his hand out in order to get more money to continue this to go. But you're right, Chris. It wouldn't take that much. Just cut off the money and bring the troops home. But it's not likely to happen, and because there's too many warmongers going on, a military-industrial complex, too many special interests. But now the Europeans, boy, they want to be involved too. Do they want to involve because they, the whole reason that this thing has come is the theoretical reason is we have to protect Europe against, the Soviet Union. Of course, there's no Soviet Union, and some days, Putin makes some more sense than a lot of other people involved in this. But the Europeans are saying, well, we have to help out here and don't do this. And then they talk about, NATO's, position where if any one nation is attacked, everybody else has to go help them. Well, that's a farce to begin with. That's never going to happen. But they say, well, maybe they'll do it. And there's probably some of our warmongers want that so that we can get involved and stay busy fighting these wars. But, they didn't do this before. We had them get involved, and it was NATO that did it. But we went along with this, and I just think it's so tragic. The founders used the term, and stay out of the entangling alliances. If you want to think of another entangled alliance, this is it. And I would have expected a little bit, a better understanding for an American First policy. American First policy sounds challenging and not smooth, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be for. I would think that when I was in Congress, whether I'm in Congress or not, I would think that maybe America First is a good answer. And what oath of office would I take and others take is to follow the Constitution. So that says you don't have authority to do all these things. So we're so far removed from reason and law that should be our law, and that is our Constitution, that we can expect this maybe to settle down, and maybe there'll be bragging rights. But I'll tell you what, the system hasn't been. The system will still not be repaired. We'll still have those same kind of problems. Maybe in Taiwan, who knows, or the Middle East. It just goes on, and they distract people. They say, "Well, we have to concentrate on Ukraine right now. There must be something big going on in Taiwan, and certainly there's big fighting still in the Middle East." So it's on and on. I guess they're waiting and pushing hard. And of course, the Marxists always like this: push it hard, but bring on chaos and total bankruptcy. Well, that's approaching, and I don't believe we can settle that until we settle the dispute and the discussion, the debate over our foreign policy. Chris.
That's right, Dr. Paul. And that was the big question when President Trump was reelected. Is he really going to make America great again, or is he looking to make the empire great again? And he has shown what his choice is. He's very concerned with the empire, and you can't have both. We can't be great here and meddle all over the world. It's impossible. But it seems like he thinks he can trick us or something. When you read his posts, he talks about this great honor of having all these European leaders here. Honestly, to the average American, who cares? You're European leaders. Get out of this war. You're hosting European leaders. And he's constantly posting that America is the hottest country in the world right now. These are his words. I mean, we live here. You don't have to tell us how it is. We know how it is. And honestly, what he's saying isn't even true, because you can't continue this Ukraine war and do what you're doing to Gaza and be admired around the world. In fact, the whole world is sick of what the U.S. does in Ukraine and Gaza, and rightly so. And Dr. Paul mentioned our founders. Well, back in the day, in the 1800s, Alexis de Tocqueville, who many will recognize his name, said something very true about America. He said at that time, America is great because she is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. end quote. And that is exactly what happened. What we do in Gaza, these are horrors. And Ukraine, this is not good. We are not admired. We are not hot, to use President Trump's words. And until this changes, we'll never be great again.
If we were honest, it would be very unpopular, and we would hear the message that we're unpatriotic, and that is that a lot of this has come about because we, the United States, had promised the Russians, as the Cold War ended, that we would not put bases, close to their borders. And that was an agreement, and there's more and more information to verify that. And the administration, our administration, said we would not go to those borders. And yet we're the ones that are on the borders. That's what this whole thing is about. But I still think that the worst thing that could come out of this, if it just staying, is probably the worst thing. But Article 5 of the rules of NATO, and that is that if one country is trying, everybody has to go to it and go and get involved. But that's what's happened. We've done this all along, and even if we get suckered into doing a secret agreement, I don't think it is even necessary, because our problem is the fact that we already went in there and we've been involved. There's nothing official about it. Oh yeah, they said that Russia invaded Ukraine. Oh, but Ukraine isn't a member of NATO. But we still went in, and we, of course, initiated it. So there's so many falsehoods and misleading statements, but this is the reason some of us get sort of disgusted and cynical, that I guess we're just going to self-destruct. We're going to keep spending, and this is a big expenditures, in the military, especially what we spend there, is all on borrowed money, and it's one of the major reasons why our interest payments keep going up. So this is, I think some of these details, they become sort of ironic. They don't have much meaning because we've already broken them. We broke them before, and what makes them think that we would do this again? Or would the Europeans hold up to it? I think anybody who really is worried about Russia, it's the Europeans that ought to look into it. And yet there was, after the Cold War ended, there were serious good attempts for an exchange of energy between Europe and Russia. But that's where the answer would come, if we would just stay out of it and let them solve their own problems.
Fantastic, Dr. Paul. I'll finish with my closing thought. We had a great Ron Paul Institute conference this weekend. Thank you for everybody who attended. It was a wonderful event. Daniel did a fantastic job putting together so many great speakers. One of them was Colonel Douglas Macgregor. And during one of his talks, he predicted that the only way to stop this militarism, that the United States is doing, and this is a colonel, he said it was a severe financial crisis, and it was quiet in the room, because you kind of know that he's kind of right, because as long as these people have the money, they're going to do this. And that's how it's always been. So, empire is not a new idea. America is not the first one to go down this path. And Dr. Paul has been saying what Colonel Macgregor has been saying for many, many years. With sound money. As long as they could print their own money and dupe people into wars, they're going to print money and dupe people into wars. That's what they're going to do. So now, what do? You have to try to fend it off as best as you can, as Dr. Paul has done with his career, as we're doing here on this show. No matter what happens, if they go bankrupt and there's a severe financial crisis, at least we can, in our own consciences, know that A, we didn't support it, and B, we spoke out against it. And if that's the best that you can do, then that's a life well lived. So that's what we have to do. That's what we all should do. And we encourage our audience. Don't support it and speak out against it. And who knows, maybe we could at least lessen the severity of the financial crisis.
As this war winds down, there's discussion and additional bombing to help decide where the boundaries are going to be. It seems like territorial parameters are the main discussion that they're having right now, and people are vying for this. But the other thing is saving face. And that's probably, I would think, more so in America than it is in Russia, where you have to satisfy this controlled media that shows that, if you don't agree with what's going on, especially, here in Ukraine and also in the Middle East, if you don't, you're called nasty names. No, you in the Middle East, if you have any suggestion of a different approach, you're anti-Semitic, they do it. Or if you don't support, our government, in Ukraine, then we're unpatriotic. But it's getting so bad, they know it's going to happen. So I think the biggest thing behind the scenes to come up with an artificial answer, and that they'll brag about it. There'll be peace in our time, of course, and another promise, and they're going to say, well, we have worked it out where the line's going to be, and everybody's going to move back. Well, I just don't think if there's a victory parade and a lot of people celebrating peace in our times, I don't think I'm going to join there. I'm going to wait and see and keep talking about why the answer has to be more than tinkering with borders here and there. When you look at how many countries we're already in and how poor we are, how weak the dollar is getting, we ought to just wake up and be realistic, because the answer is not that difficult. All we have to do in this country is get the government off our back, have a system where the money you earn is yours, and let people go back to work and change foreign policy and change this crazy stuff going on in the social networks in this country with all the DEIs and nonsense of regulating people. So freedom is the answer. Freedom is easy. Freedom is popular. We used to know what it was like, and today we hear bits and pieces of it, and people get excited about it. But we still have a long way to go, because I think the cleansing of the system is going to be a lot more difficult than most people believe. Because there's been, and we have to give Trump and the new government some credit for this, for cleaning up some of the messes. At least people know about USAID. Even though they didn't cut one penny, there is more evidence that people understand that. So there is some progress, but boy, it has a long way to go. And that is why I think the march to bankruptcy is going to continue. And unfortunately, the bankruptcy involves financial, which is devastating to just about everybody. And then it's also going to be a moral bankruptcy. And that's a little more difficult to handle. But that is something that will make all the difference in the world, and I think people have to know and understand and endorse the principle of natural law, because that's been known before printing presses were around, before they even knew about it. And governments had devised a system which they believed would help. No lying and no cheating, no stealing and no killing. And a lot of people still believe that, but what they don't understand is they're allowing the government to do it. They lie to us all the time, and they cheat and steal, and they manipulate us. So, but I think, in spite of it all, I think the interest in a free society is growing by leaps and bounds, but it's going to take a lot of work, but it takes a lot more education for the people to accept this, to realize taking your medicine is the only way we save our republic. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.